Hey guys, it's Adrienne. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to bring you my wrap up for the first third of the year because apparently we're already in May. I'm not going to talk to you in any great detail about these books because I've read 28 of them so far up until April, obviously more now that May is here, and that would just take forever. So I'm just going to give you a star rating, and if you want to know more about the book and my opinion about the book, you can check my Goodreads. Generally, I don't leave huge, long reviews on Goodreads. I probably should start doing that, but I'm lazy, so I don't. But I do have my basic opinions about the book, so you can always check that. Starting off with the very first book I read this year, I started in December and I finished on January 1st, so it counts as 2020. That is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I can't... This is a problem. Anyway, I gave this book 3 stars. This is a psychological thriller and I wasn't a huge fan of it. It was interesting, but I wasn't a huge fan of it. Next up in January was The Romance Book Club by Lisa K. Adams. I gave this one a 4.5. This is a contemporary romance. I really enjoyed this one. I have been slowly growing into the romance. I'm still really picky about which kind of romances I will read, and you'll see more of that as this video goes along. But they have been becoming a normal in my life lately. So 4.5 for The Romance Book Club. Another 4.5 read for the month of January was A Heart in the Body in a World by Deb Coletti. I really liked this one too. It was a little bit more of a hard-hitting book, but I quite enjoyed it. Next up was Stealing Snow by Danielle Page. This one I was a little cautious going into because it had real mixed reviews. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, I fell in the middle. I gave this one a 3.5. This one is like a Snow Queen retelling, and that I did enjoy, and I do want to read the sequel. I can't remember if it's out already or if it's coming out, but I would like to read it, so it wasn't horrible. Next up was Legendary by Stephanie Garber. I read Caraval, the first book in this series, way back in February of 2017. I had just started my booktube channel in October of the previous year, and I did a read along with Kim from Kim here, and I haven't picked up the second book since because I wasn't entirely interested in reading it. That being said, I did read it and I did give it a 4 stars, so it was pretty good, and I do want to read the third book in the series. It's not high on my list of priorities, but I would like to finish it out. I did enjoy it enough to want to finish it at least. It's funny how some of these books I feel like I read a year ago, and some of them I feel like I read just yesterday. One of them being Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This I gave a 5 stars. This is probably one of my favorite reads, if not my favorite read of the year so far. It took me a while to actually pick this one up because it's about ice hockey and I didn't think I would like it, but I loved it. In fact, I've been recommending it to everybody in my family to read. Loved it, loved it, loved it. 5 stars. That's about it for the month of January. Moving on to the month of February. By the way, notice how I didn't say anything about where I've been for the last 8 months. Not gonna talk about it. First up in February was Water for Elephants. This one was a historical fiction about a circus, and I thought I would never want to read this. I got this from a friend of mine and I didn't really particularly want to read it, but I found an audiobook and I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. I really liked this. Next up was The Ones Who Got Away by Ronnie Lowen. I didn't love this one, I didn't hate this one. This is another romance book. This one revolves around school shooting that happened, and then we're following these characters several years later. It was okay, run-of-the-mill, not my favorite. It was just alright. Next up was Twisted Palace by Aaron Watt. This is the third book. I think it's called the Royal series. I gave this one a 3 stars because it, again, was sort of run-of-the-mill. I did like this book. See, here's the thing. These books, as far as writing style goes, are just not good. They're just not good. But they are guilty pleasures. I thoroughly enjoyed myself reading this book. That being said, because it wasn't the best ever written book, it only got 3 stars. But I do want to read the 2 spin-off books. There's 2 spin-off books about another one of the brothers from this family. So, guilty pleasures. Next up, I finished in March, but I started in the beginning of 2019, and that's The Daily Message Going Through the Bible in 1 Year by Eugene Peterson. This is the message version of the Bible. I listened to it on audiobook mostly every morning. Some days I forgot, which is why it took me a year and 3 months instead of a year. But we learn and grow. Anyway, I can't really rate this book because I feel like I can't rate the Bible. To just I'd go to hell or something. Next up is Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This one I gave it 3.5 stars. I have a thing. If there is a favorite genre that I have, or I should say a favorite subgenre, it's fae fantasy. I love fae fantasy. I love fae fantasy, certainly if there's a little bit of romance involved. It's like my perfect combination. I'm not a huge fan of just straight up romance books, but when it comes to fae, I'm all about it. Anyway, this one got a 3.5. It wasn't the best fae book that I've ever read. It wasn't the worst fae book I've ever read. I did enjoy it. I would like to read more books from this author. Another new all-time favorite, and we all say, why haven't you read this book years ago when you should have? The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Are you surprised? No, I actually am a little bit surprised because I knew this was a slow burning book, and slow burning fantasy books and we don't always mix. Sometimes we like each other, sometimes we don't like each other. More often than not, we're not friends. This one was fantastic for reasons that I don't have to get into because nearly everybody, not everybody, but nearly everybody who's read this book really enjoyed it. I am now one of them. Moving on to the month of March. First up was The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. I went into this one with huge expectations because Holly Black is the queen of fae books, I think. Well, she's one of them. Anyway, she has to share the queen title. I'm digressing. This one, I only gave a 3.5 and I can't remember why. I do know that it was really dark and it was a little, I don't want to say too dark because the darker fae stories are growing on me. I do like a little bit of the darker fae lore mixed into my fae fantasy books, but this one I can't remember why I didn't give it a higher rating, but I didn't, and I'm sorry. But anyway, 3.5. Next up for the month of March is Liturgy of the Ordinary by Trish Harrison Warren. This one was recommended to me a long time ago, I think right when it first came out, by Katie from Life Between Words, and I really enjoyed it. This is just about taking biblical concepts and spiritual liturgies into the everyday life, and I thought it was very refreshing and very insightful and very impactful. In fact, I even did a whole journal session thing of all these like extra questions at the end of the book to help me bring these practices into my everyday life. I really enjoy it. In fact, if you like these kinds of Christian inspirational books, I would really recommend this one. I gave it a 5 stars. It was really, really good. Right after that, I was on a Christian nonfiction kick. I was doing them as part of my devotionals after I had finished Bible, and I decided to pick up The 5 Love Languages for Children by Gary Chapman. This one I only gave a 2 stars. It makes me wonder why I ever really enjoyed the first book in the first place because it was so boring. I'm sure that this book helps a lot of people. I know that I read 5 Love Languages. I actually have it here on my bookshelf, but it makes me wonder what was I thinking because this one was boring. Yes, there were definitely a few good tips in it, but I just didn't like it. I gave it a 2 stars. Moving on from Christian nonfiction to Lifelike by Jay Kristoff because these two couldn't be more further from each other at all. But this book was fantastic. This was a post-apocalyptic book about robots. Generally speaking, I don't like robots. But this one, because it's Jay Kristoff, I needed to get it and at least give it a try. I really, really, really liked this one. It was action from cover to cover. It got 5 stars and I cannot wait to read the sequel. Next up, as a part of middle grade March, I read School for Good and Evil, The Last Ever After by Sunan Shinani. This one was on one of my series I'll never finish books. But a friend of mine gave me the 3rd copy when she found it, and so I decided to listen to it on audiobook just to finish out the series. I didn't like the first 2 books. I have many reasons. In fact, I have a book review on the first book. I did enjoy the first book. It had problems. The second book got more problematic. The 3rd book resolved some of the problems, created more problems. I gave it a 3.5. I expected to give it a lot lower. I gave it a 3.5. Congratulations, you. Next up, I read Come Tumbling Down by Seanan McGuire. This is another series that when I finished the first book, I said I'd never read. And then I picked up an audiobook, and they just got better and better and better, and I absolutely loved them. This one, though, wasn't my favorite. I would say Ever Had a Doorway I didn't like at all. The next 2 books I really enjoyed. This one fell sort of in the middle. I gave this one a 3.5 as well. This one just didn't go where I wanted it to. It just left me a little bit disappointing. I hope that being said, I'm not giving up on the series because lesson learned. I really enjoy the series. Just because I don't enjoy every book, I do enjoy the series as a whole. Next book that I read in the month of March was Confess by Colleen Hoover. I gave this book a 3.5 stars and I can't remember why. It's unusual for me to give Colleen Hoover, that low of a rating, and by all means 3.5 stars is not a low rating. It's pretty good. I guess I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, but I seem to remember I liked it, so I don't know. Moving on to the month of April. All of these books that I read were for the Owl's Magical Readathon. I really wanted to get videos up before now, but it just didn't work. Like I said, don't want to talk about it. But I did do the career for Wand Maker. I think it's called Wand Maker. And I succeeded. I also did the extra track for a train engineer, so I could drive the Hogwarts Express, because duh, who wouldn't want to do that? And I got that one too. So I'm very excited for my news. I've never participated in an Owl Magical Readathon before because I just didn't have the time. But you know, since we're all quarantined. I don't have my Owl's Magical Readathon tracker, so I don't really remember which prompts these fell into, but I did do them all. The first book that I read was Beautiful Bastards by Christina Lauren. This one I gave a 3 stars. Again, romance. They always seem to be middle of the road for me. I did like this one to some degree. I thought it was overdone. I'm not afraid of a little bit of adults, but this just went way too far. It was just too far. It was unbelievable. It was cringeworthy. I just didn't like it. I did like the characters. I just didn't like the adulting very much. By the way, my 11-year-old is sitting right next to me, which is why I'm not going into any detail. Next up, I read a poetry book. I never read poetry books, but it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep, and I needed a book for something. I can't remember. And this one was available on Scribd, so I picked it up. It was like an hour and a half read, and it was read by the author. I don't like poetry unless they're read to me by the author, because then I can get the full intention of the book. I gave it a 3 stars, which isn't bad because I'm not a huge poetry fan. I can appreciate the art of poetry. It just doesn't really speak to me like it does others. So 3 stars for a poetry book is pretty good for me. Next up is the novella in the Beautiful Bastard series that I'm not going to say because children. I did like this one a little bit better than I liked the first book. It was shorter, it follows the same characters, it was cute. Again, same problems. It was a little overdone. It was a little unbelievable. It was a little cringeworthy, but I did like it just a tiny bit better. I can't remember if I said this already, but I gave it a 3.5. Next up was a book that I needed to read. I think it was for the Care of Magical Creatures, and I remember this because I needed to read a book with a beak on the cover. And I couldn't think of one until I saw Mr. Popper's Penguins by Richard and Florentine Offwater, however you say that in English. This is the Dutch version. I actually, after I read the book, I bought it for my 9-year-old to read in Dutch because she doesn't read English yet. And I liked this one. It was really cute. It was exactly what was it, 3rd grade or 4th grade we remembered. I enjoyed it. It was funny. It was quirky. It was a little slow. Definitely liked the book more than I liked the movie, as most things go. The movie was very different from the book, but that's neither here nor there. I gave this book a 4 stars. Next up for the month of April, I read Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. This is a superhero book. I used to be a huge fan of superhero movies back in the day before there weren't like 35 Marvel movies, and then I kind of gave up. But I was excited to read this one, and obviously I love Brandon Sanderson books, so I was hoping that this one would not disappoint, and it didn't. I gave this a 4 stars. I will be continuing on with the series. It wasn't my favorite Brandon Sanderson book, but I did enjoy it. Next up was another kids book that I was listening to with my kids while they were being homeschooled. We did reading time just before lunch or just after lunch every day, and that was from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler by E.L. Koningsberg? Whatever. English names are not good for me anymore. I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. I know I liked it when I was a kid, and I know that it is a classic, and I know that it is beloved by one and all, but I thought it was really boring. Next up, I read Sea Witch by Sarah Henning. This was a last-minute decision because I needed a book that takes place in the seashore. I had heard about this book earlier, wasn't particularly interested in it. I did read it. It's a Little Mermaid retelling. Well, it's actually the Ursula retelling from The Little Mermaid. And I actually really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 stars, and I definitely would like to read the sequel. Another 5-star read for this year was Things My Son Needs to Know About the World by Frederick Bachman. Not really surprised. Most every book that I have read by him so far has gotten at least a 4.5 stars, if not 5 stars. This one was hysterical. I listened to this on audiobook as I was reading along, and I could not stop laughing. The nice thing about this book though is that it makes you laugh, but then it also makes you think, oh, I actually think that's really kind of sad. This book was great. For any parents, I would recommend to read this book. If you're not a parent, read it anyway because it will make you laugh and make you feel sorry for the parents. Lastly, the last book that I read was It's Not Supposed to Be This Way by Lisa Turkert. I think it's how you pronounce her last name. I read this book with someone I know who's having a tough time in life, and I thought it'd be a great buddy read. And I absolutely loved this book. It's another biblical principles about when things just don't turn out the way you wanted them to, when you're having a hard time in life, when you're down and out, and sort of like these spiritual biblical truths, but not in a cheesy, corny way. I feel like, again, I'm gonna get struck by lightning for saying that, but actual, like, impactful, powerful. I enjoyed it, and I wasn't even reading it for myself, but I got a lot out of this book. So if you're going through a hard time and you like Christian books, I would recommend this book for sure. It was phenomenal. 5-star read. So those are all the books that I have read so far in 2020, up until April anyway. As of this moment, it is currently May 26th, and I am at 33 books in my Goodreads reading challenge. So I'm 13 books ahead of schedule, 12, 13 books, somewhere around there. I'm pretty impressed with myself. Even though I've been in a booktube slump, I have not been in a reading slump, which is fantastic. Let me know down below, what is your favorite book that you have read so far this year, because I am building up my TBR for the second half of the year and I'm really excited. I've got some good books planned, but I can always use more, if you know what I mean. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you have not yet, I would love for you to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.